my name is Maryam Pasha. Essie very generously introduced me as a scientist, which I think is not 100% true given the talent in this room, but it's very generous. I did study psychology as my undergraduate and my master's, so I guess somewhere along the lines there. But what I do now is I work with people from all different backgrounds to help them develop their skills in public speaking. So I might work with students, I might work with CEOs, I might work with human rights activists, I might work with charity leaders. So kind of this whole big scheme of different kinds of people, but are all who are passionate in being able to speak in a way that's compelling and persuades and influences, but also makes people feel confident. And I guess for me it comes down to the fact that I feel like society needs to hear from different people. You know, what we've been doing in the past hasn't been working, obviously, and so the solutions for the future aren't going to lie in hearing from the same voices we've been listening to for the past 150 years. And so in order to do that, there are going to be people who need to be able to communicate. There are going to be people who need to be able to speak. But it doesn't just come magically. Sure, some people are great public speakers, but you know, if you'd met me when I was in primary school, I was in secondary school, I was that kid at the back of the room, terrified of speaking. And it took a really long time to feel confident and feel like I had something to say that mattered. And I really hope that over today and tomorrow I can help you start on that journey, if you haven't started already, to feel like you're building some skills, to take away some knowledge, to start to plant those seeds of being confident. And it actually came down, I was thinking when Essie said about, you know, the last 100, whatever, 200, 300, 400 years, when you talk about scientists, you think of like old white men or young white men. There was a survey done recently in America that talked about technology leaders, and it asked people to name male and female technology leaders. And for the men, people could name like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. And for the women, they named Alexa, like Amazon Alexa, and Siri, and that was it. And so whether it's in science or in technology, we've still got a huge way to go to make our voices heard. And so for me, this is the first step for kind of some of you, and I hope that it will be the beginning not only of a long scientific career, but a long career of speaking and raising your voices. So today we'll be looking at confidence. Today we're going to be looking at how to deal with nerves, how you're going to build that confidence, tell that story, be authentic to who you are, and also how you're going to get there by listening and asking great questions of the amazing people you're going to be meeting over the next 2 days. But first, because I will say this, right? I'm going to be doing probably more speaking today than I will be doing tomorrow, but don't get me wrong. This is a public speaking workshop, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to be the only one speaking. You're all going to be speaking in one way, shape, or form. So the first thing to say is that this is a totally safe space. If you're nervous, if you stumble, if you say the wrong word, if you lose your train of thought, don't worry about it. I'm nervous. I get nervous every time I speak up here. I don't know if you can tell, but my voice gets a bit wavery and quivery at the beginning because I have to hit like a flow. So this is the place where you come and test and mess up. So don't worry about it. But what I will encourage is for all of you, in even a very small way, to speak. And so to start with, that very small way is to get to know each other. So what you're going to be doing, and I'll be really strict with the timings here, is you're going to talk to the person next to you. So hopefully we can get these pairs working. And if you're like at the end of a row, maybe turn around and speak to the person behind you. And if you don't have someone, let me know, and myself or my colleague Tara will join your pair. And the idea is I want you to basically find out about the person next to you for 1 minute. And then I want you to switch, so they find out about you for 1 minute. And then you're going to have 30 seconds to introduce that person to the group. Right? So if you want to write anything down, I'm terrible with names. I would probably write down the person's name because I would even forget it in the 1 minute that they told me. Any like interesting things about them, and then I'm just going to have you speak and tell us about your partner. How does that sound? Yeah? Good. Now, I also don't mean to massively underestimate you. You may all be like expert prize-winning public speakers. So in that case, please, please, please speak up and come up here and lead it with me as well. So wherever you are at your skill level, hopefully something for the next 2 days will be for you. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my timer. And the first thing we're going to do is find your partner, find your pair. Let's do that first. I hope that gave you a bit of a sense of who's in the room and that you have quite a lot in common, and got you speaking. I'm looking forward to all of you continuing to raise your voices over the next bit of time. But let's get into it. So, before we get into the actual speaking and the technical stuff, I want to talk a little bit about confidence, because I think that in a way, confidence underlies so much of our ability to communicate, because it's not just the confidence to speak, but it's the confidence in what we're saying. And I guess I wanted to find out from all of you, when do you feel really confident? What are those moments in which you feel like, I got this? Yes?
I think I'm most confident like in a comfortable, safe environment.
Okay.
Where like I know no one will laugh at me.
Great.
When I'm sure of myself, when I know like my knowledge of like something is correct.
Great.
But I'm least confident when there's like immature boys in the room. Aren't we all?
Yeah, I think that continues through life. Yeah. Thank you for being our first participant. Who else? Who else? Tell me about when you do or don't feel confident, or if there's a mix in there. No. I can tell you a bit about when I feel confident. So for me, it comes down to what you were saying as well. If I feel like I know what I'm doing, right? Like I feel like I've spent some time, I've prepped a little bit, I kind of know my subject matter, I'm not being put on the spot. Also, you know, when I'm speaking to a group of people who I know want to listen to me, not when I'm trying to speak to a group of people who don't want to listen to me and are actively, you know, speaking while I'm speaking or on their phones or whatever it might be. But I've learned to like enjoy doing things that I'm very new at as well, because I think that as I've gotten a bit older, I don't mind that feeling of not knowing what I'm doing, as long as I feel like it's a safe environment. Any other thoughts? I'm going to get you participating. So anyone else, when you feel really confident? Some people said they do debating here. Talk to me about when you feel good about when you're debating.
It adds to both of what you said, that it's when you know your content. It's when you are aware that what you're saying is right, and you yourself you know your knowledge, so then you can articulate it to anyone else because of your awareness of knowing it. Also, I think, it comes down to the people you're around as well. There are at times people that don't want to listen to you. So that might be a bit intimidating, in the fact that your confidence levels can go low. But I think it's just a learning curve, because you're going to meet people like Rose, as you said. And that's why I think it's just like something you need to overcome as time passes. You just need to say what you believe in and speak up whenever you want. And I think that's the key of having confidence.
Cool. Anyone else? Maybe about sports or art or doing exams?
I feel confident when I'm performing music, like when I'm playing an instrument, because, well, at first I get really nervous, but then, like, I realize that, again, like I've practiced a million times, that it comes as a natural thing, so I feel confident when something is, like, more comfortable to do.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I found with confidence, right, is that it's kind of like a lifelong journey. And you kind of go through these different phases. And first you start to feel confident in safe spaces with stuff that you know. And then you start to feel confident in safe spaces, stuff that maybe you don't know so well, but you're testing out. And then you get to the point where you feel confident in spaces that are unsafe with stuff that you know. And then eventually, hopefully, you get to a place where you feel confident in spaces that maybe aren't so safe because you don't know really what the audience is thinking, and maybe you've been put on the spot, but you feel like you've got enough to back you up. And I think that one of the things that I always found after school was, for a long time when you're in school, you know, people don't always want to hear what you have to say. You're always citing other people, right? I know I've got some academics in the room, so you're always citing other people. And then as you go out into the world more and more, you kind of have to write or say the words I think and I believe and I want. And that's really scary, because all of a sudden it's not like this abstract thing of other people have said all this stuff and I'm just kind of with them, but it's putting yourself out there. And so what I'm hoping is that slowly over the next few days, as you speak to all these various scientists and you kind of, you know, develop your thoughts, that you do think of this as a safe space, and you can do both. You can both say, these are things I've heard and I agree with that. But you can also say, these are things that I think, and start to test that out. But The other thing about confidence is that people always link it to being nervous, right? So like confidence is the positive and that feeling of being nervous. And I want to know what you think, maybe you've seen with other people or even yourself, being nervous looks or feels like.
Being nervous is like, although you have practiced before, for example, going on stage, or the nerves kick in, which is like negative thoughts of what certain people will be thinking of you, like if they think that, oh, you're going to mess up or you're boring or something.
Yeah.
And all the things that you have revised before or learned before goes out of your mind. Some people, you can tell when they're nervous because their voice might be shaking or they might start fiddling or they might start stuttering. Whereas you on the inside, even though you look confident, you kind of like overthink and things might come out.
Absolutely. That's absolutely, yeah. We'll talk about all of those things. Anyone else about themselves or other people looking and feeling nervous? What does it feel like?
When I'm nervous and I'm about to go on stage, I start shaking. And also, I always think of the worst case scenario.
Yep.
Like going off key or like tripping on my way to the stage.
Yep.
Stuff like that. So I think of the worst case scenario, which brings me further down and makes me more nervous. So when I'm up there, I don't sing to my best ability because I'm still thinking of those scenarios.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. See, all those things that your mind does to kind of almost play tricks on you to make you feel nervous. Anyone else shaking hands? Yeah?
So from time to time I get super lightheaded, nauseous, feel as though I might pass out.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
On Friday I met a new friend and they were really nervous about it and they couldn't make any eye contact with me and they were kind of like walking away.
Yeah.
And I saw one of the people here outside, we were just walking, we saw her, and he kind of like looked down and like moved to the side. He was, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Making eye contact, like, so I completely agree with this. Is amazing because this is exactly what loads of people, and this happens to people of all ages. On the inside, you can be thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Your mind can go blank. You can forget, not just your mind goes blank on those topics, but you might just forget the words that you're supposed to say. You can start to catastrophize, like, I'm going to trip, I'm going to fall. I mean, there's a reason I don't wear heels whenever I'm on stage, because that is like my number one thing. I'm going to fall over a carpet edge or a microphone cord. You're going to see me getting red, for example, or my hands shaking or sweating, or fiddling with rings and cuffs and moving and shaking. And this is a key one. Never looking at the audience, looking down, looking up, thinking about what I'm going to say, and it's like this building, overwhelming thing, and everyone feels this, right? I run an event which people have mentioned before, TEDx London, and this year it was about 2,000 people in the audience. I've done it for 8 years. I should be fine. Every time, about 1 minute before I'm about to go on stage, I feel like someone has kicked me in the stomach, and I have this panic of thought of this is a terrible idea. Who thought this was going to be a good idea? Why did I sign up for this? I'm doing this voluntarily. Can I leave? Right? And it's always fine. And I always get it together. But it does. So I think even for someone like me, whose job it is to speak in front of groups of people, whether it's a day before, a week before, or an hour or a minute before, those nerves kick in, right? So do you guys have strategies of what you do to help with those?
I believe in the universe, so what you put out is what you're going to get back. So if you think negative thoughts, the negative thoughts are going to come back to you. So instead of thinking that someone is going to think that I'm boring or do something to put me off, I think positive thoughts and saying it is going to go okay, I'm going to do fine, and I will try and remain calm and don't think of negative thoughts. I think positively.
Okay. And what kind of positive thoughts do you think? Do you have things you say to yourself or think?
I reassure myself that it's going to be okay, and that I try not to let any negative thoughts in. And if it was an exam, I say to myself that I have revised this, it's going to be okay. Try and answer every question, even if it's not related to, should probably get a few marks. If it was something to do with dancing, I try to think of the next steps to come. If it doesn't come, I just be calm and let my body do whatever.
Cool. Great. You can teach a lot of people. Yeah.
Mine's quite similar, I guess, in some ways. I think that I try to think you can only do your best, and this small event isn't going to be everything. So
Yeah.
in 2 hours, 2 days, a week, it won't be as important anymore. So just try and see it as what it is and don't let it dictate everything else.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think about times that I felt nervous before, and then I remember that I can't really think of anything, so that means it's not going to be that important.
Yes. Put it in context. Anyone else got some thoughts? Yes.
I once had an absolute disaster at a birthday party, and I had to do a speech in front of lots of people that I knew, and my mind went completely blank. And I had some thoughts written down on a piece of paper, but they were in my bag at the other side of the room, and I couldn't get to them, and I stood there for ages. So now, if I have to do something where I'm not sure, I keep something in my back pocket that I can just whip out, and I know that if my mind goes blank, I've got like a safety net behind me.
I don't even need this next slide because you've all said all of this stuff, which is so wonderful. And let me summarize, because that's absolutely right. One of the things is reframe, right? Take all of that nervous, awful energy and develop a way to almost counter it. Like a little statement, like, this is going to be okay. If I get things wrong or it goes badly, it's only one day. It's only one thing. It's only one exam. Whatever your like little mantra, whatever your little thing that you might say in your head, to try to reframe it. But the other way to do it is, instead of just saying, well, it's going to be fine and don't worry about it, if you can, is to take all those nervous things, right? Like if you think about feeling nervous and you think about feeling excited, they're actually very similar, right? It's just how you think about them. When you're feeling excited, you may also be a bit jumpy and shaky, right? Your hands may also be a bit sweaty. You may also feel a bit like, short of breath and a bit red, and maybe your mind is racing. And when you feel nervous, you feel lots of those similar things. So if you can turn that dial over time to take all of those physiological feelings of nerves and reframe the way your mind thinks about them into excitement, it's a really very useful way, and it takes time. It's not going to happen right away, and you're absolutely going to fail at it, right? You're going to have like really good days and really, really bad days at it, and it's kind of like an ongoing process. But if you can, the more you can push that dial from nervous to excitement, the better experience you're going to have. Because I think the thing to keep in mind is that the sad thing about nerves, right, is that it stops you from being the best in the world, but it also robs the world of what you have to say. And this is a real two-way street, and I think it's hard to feel like what I have to say is really important and matters, and the world will be worse off because I haven't said it. But it's actually true, because when you multiply that among millions and millions of people who don't speak up because of those nerves, how many great ideas, how many great perspectives, how many allies are we losing out on because of those nerves? So it's really your responsibility to help turn that dial. The other thing is to have almost like a ritual. Comedians have this, right? I have a lot of friends who are comedians, and I've worked with them. And the first time I did it, I was like, what is going on? Like, these are these bubbly, kind of confident people on stage. And then backstage, they won't speak to anyone for like an hour. They'll like sit in a room with their back to everyone, facing a wall, like totally in their zone. They'll just have a bit of water. They'll like be practicing, and they'll be calm, and they won't let anyone else in. Now, you may not need that extreme. Maybe your kind of comfort ritual might be having a cup of coffee, or talking to some friends, or listening to some music, or whatever it might be. But developing a way to calm yourself down is really useful, because you can use that in so many different spaces. And then obviously there's this idea of what do you do when you're nervous on stage, right? Like in those moments. So one of them is, whenever I'm coaching speakers who are going to give like a big talk, I'm like, you've got like your kind of couple of steps. First, you breathe. First you pause. And if it doesn't come to you, like what you're going to say, or you're not feeling better, then you take a deep breath. If it still doesn't come to you, then you take a drink of water. If it still doesn't come to you, you take a little walk to the side of the stage. You're all of the time buying yourself a bit of time to calm down, to go back in your mind if you've forgotten about what you want to say, or your mind's going blank. And actually, it may seem really awkward to you to pause, like it might feel like a lifetime. But what it's actually done, especially if you're someone like me and you speak very quickly, is it's given the poor audience a chance to also breathe, to also absorb what you've just said, and then to keep going. So the idea is that you think about what you're going to do before you do something that's nerve-wracking, whether it be an exam or a performance or a talk, and then you've got things, strategies in your mind of what you're going to do during. And one of them, which I love, is the safety net, right? Also a trick I learned from comedians. Often you'll see comedians on stage with like a bottle of beer. What you don't see is on the back of that, they have a sticky label with their set list. Like each of the jokes in the right order stuck on the back of the bottle. And so if they forget the order of the jokes, because everything is so planned, they reach for their bottle, they take a drink, and they've got it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you get up with a bottle of beer every time you're going to give a talk or performance, but having a note card in your pocket, right, with the 5 things you have to say, no problem, right? It ends up being the 5th step. First you breathe. First you pause, then you breathe, then you have water, then you take a walk, and then worst comes to worst, you just pull this out of your pocket, you have a quick look, and you're on your way. So I think having these strategies and thinking about it, because I think one of the things about being nervous is you don't want to think about being nervous, right? Like, it's not a pleasant thought to sit there constantly being like, let me imagine the time I was most nervous last and how it felt. But you need to kind of embrace that in order to then come up with ideas of how to solve it, right? It's like everything. If you don't think about it, if you don't understand it, there's no way you're going to kind of counteract it. And the last thing I think someone said here is that most people that you will care about listening to you don't want you to fail. In most audiences that you're in front of, people don't want you to fail. None of you, I hope, maybe some of you are, which is cool, are sitting there thinking about me. Oh, I hope she does terribly. I hope she totally fails. I hope her mind goes blank and that she's totally embarrassed and runs out the room. Most of you, because also that's not a good experience for you, right? Like, that would be like a horrible experience in the audience, and it'd be a horrible experience for me. And so you have to think about it when you're speaking. Most people are not sitting there going, I can't wait till this person fails. I can't wait till they totally forget what they're going to say. What they want in the audience is to listen to you, to be interested and excited and curious and made curious by what you're going to say. So your job is to do those things and not worry that they're going to think that what you're saying is boring or uninteresting. And there'll always be some. There'll always be some people who do not want to hear what you have to say and who will be like that. But actually, those are not really the people 99% of the time that you're going to want to speak to. I mean, I don't know if any of you are familiar with like the show Dragon's Den. You know, a little bit where you get to, you're a business person, you pitch to like 5 billionaires or millionaires who then like rip you apart and then they give you money if you survive that. Like, sorry, that's my summary of this show. Like, that is not life. Like you very rarely are in those situations where someone is there to like purposely rip you apart. So do try to find those smiling, friendly faces in the audience. You know, I still do it. I will look at the people who are smiling at me, who are nodding at me. So I'm like, yes, people are hearing me. It's okay. I'm making sense. I'm not rambling. Let's keep going. So with all that, before I go on to the next bit, I just want to say one very quick thing. And I'm just going to check how I'm doing with time. How am I doing with time? I have my timings here. Yes, I'm doing okay with time. Something that some of you mentioned was about feeling really knowledgeable about what you're going to speak about. And that is absolutely true. You know, one of the things I tell everyone I work with is prepare, rehearse, get to know your material. You know, it will be a very long time before you've got enough kind of material where you can just stand up and speak. Eventually you will. Like, really great public speakers, professors, for example, are classic with this. They've been teaching for so long that they've got like almost like a 100-piece puzzle of knowledge. And then when they want to get up and speak in front of someone, they just take 10 of those pieces and they recombine them and they push it out, you know. But they've spent the last like 25 years developing all of this material, so it's a really easy process for them to pull and then almost speak spontaneously. But they're not speaking spontaneously, right? They've got 25 years in their back pocket. So when you're newer, you spend that time, you prepare, you rehearse. Those of you who do debating, you know that. You prepare your arguments, your point of view, your rebuttals. But the thing is, there's a little catch. And one of the things that I am really interested in addition to public speaking, is something called imposter syndrome. And I don't know if any of you have heard of imposter syndrome. Give me some hands of people who've never heard about it. Or never heard about it. Okay, cool, right, this is what I thought. You may be very lucky and be pre-feeling imposter syndrome in your career. You may have just started to feel it. But let me tell you a little bit about it and why I think it's important here. So imposter syndrome is not a medical condition. It's very falsely named in that sense. I prefer to call them imposter feelings. And essentially, it's this feeling that you don't know what you're doing, that you're not good enough, but somehow you fooled everyone around you into thinking that you're great. And one day, very, very soon, you're going to get found out, and it's going to be hugely embarrassing. Now that I've said that, how many people identify with that kind of feeling? Yeah, it's great. It's really wonderful. I've had it for a very long time. You're in good company. Now, the reason I bring it up is that I could give a 10-hour talk about that. But the reason it's important here, right, is that one of the things imposter syndrome does is it tells you you don't know enough. You don't know enough to speak. You're not an expert. You're not good enough. And so you have to find this balance for yourself between thinking, actually, I haven't prepared enough and I could do a bit more, and not getting caught in this trap of being like, one more year, one more degree, one more paper, one more talk, one more book I've read, one more thing, and then I will have enough knowledge. As if there's even a thing as enough knowledge, right? We're always constantly learning, and particularly with science, it's always constantly changing. So the thing is you have to be very aware not to, as you kind of go through your academic career, to get caught up in this idea of I'm not good enough, like I don't know enough. I haven't come from the right kinds of schools or the right kinds of backgrounds to be the kind of person that says the kinds of things that other people want to listen to, because that is all here, right? If you've put in some time, if you've prepared, you will always have something to say. And sometimes as you get going, what you're saying might come spontaneously, and that's amazing. So I just want you to think about that balance of, yes, one way to combat nerves is to prepare, but don't fall into this competency trap that imposter syndrome gives you. Okay, that's my little rant about imposter syndrome. So the next thing I want to talk about, which comes back to building your confidence, is authenticity. And you will have seen this in the room already, right? Everyone here has a different way of expressing themselves. Some people are super quiet. Some people are super loud. I'm over here. I'm a bit irreverent in what I'm saying sometimes. Like, I'm not that interested in maintaining old structures and doing whatever I might be doing. I like to make my audience feel comfortable and to laugh, but also to feel safe if they need to be serious. Those are the things about me, and those are like a mixing board, right? Those are all the things that are my style and voice. And in different audiences and in different circumstances, I will turn certain things up and down. So if I'm working with like the CEO of a FTSE 100 company, I'm not going to be like, crazy until they've gotten to know me. I'm going to tone that down a little bit, but I'll still be authentic to who I am. And the reason I say this is that it goes back to what we were talking about this field being dominated by people that always look and sound the same, is that you can get caught up in this mindset that in order to be a scientist, in order to be a speaker, in order to be a technologist, I have to sound a certain way. I have to speak a certain way. I have to present a certain way. And I want to tell you that that's not true. What you need to do is find out who you are, find out what your voice sounds like and what it feels like to you, and then you have to learn to amplify it in different ways. So what I would like you all to do is to take a minute. First of all, actually, before we get there, does that make sense? Do you have any questions? Is that nuts? Nods, smiles. Because what I want you to do is just take a minute by yourself, just a couple of minutes, and think about what is my voice? What is my style? Am I loud? Am I quiet? Am I energetic? Am I thoughtful? Am I funny? What are the adjectives and words I'd put around me? And I see that most of you don't have anything to write on, but they do have. Do you have things in the packs?
Writing pads in your
packs. So I want you to take those out, and I want you to throw down some words. And I want this to be the first time you think about your authentic style. as I said, for me, the secret to great public speaking is preparation, it's time, and it's practice. No one is a great public speaker day one, and people who seem good to you in day one can improve hugely over their lifetime. And so what we're going to talk about now a little bit is about this presentation that you're going to be giving tomorrow, and about how you can spend some time preparing and practicing together. So before I go there, as we're kind of wrapping up the bit on confidence, is there anything anyone wants to say, or any questions, or anything that's popped into your mind? Yeah?
So there was this one time where they came to interview us, me and Sharaf, for a thing, and I started speaking complete gibberish.
Yep.
Like I was about to say nice to meet you, but then it just came out all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how to fix that, because I usually get so nervous and I start speaking gibberish.
Sure. So now you know, right? Like now you know that the next time you're going into an interview, you need to practice your first sentence in your mind. And that's the same thing when you're doing speaking. Always practice your first sentence. It's like your runway. If you can nail it, you've taken off and it feels more comfortable. So it sounds silly, right? To practice like, hi, my name is Maryam, nice to meet you. But actually, just say it. And then you may fail another time. It may be a bit weird, but then after a while, it will start to come naturally. But what's great about this is that in a very low risk environment, you've identified something that you need to work on. And those are gold moments. Like the moment when you fail in a safe space, that's magic. Because it means that you've identified something to work on without having any consequences for what's happening around you. And so that's what I would do. And the more you latch onto those moments, that's the way you need to kind of reframe them.
Why do we actually feel nervous? So if we can identify the reasons to it, we can basically solve the problem.
Yes, this is a fantastic question, and I can tell that I'm in a room full of scientists, because that is the question to ask. I cannot answer that question for you. I'm sure there may be someone in this department who looks at that, but what I can tell you is that that feeling of it just being you, that is universal. The imposter syndrome stuff I talked about before, one of the key characteristics of it, right, one of the key things that identifies it is it makes you feel alone. It makes you feel like everyone else is out living their best life, that's like amazing, they're confident, they know what they're doing, and I am freaking out over here because I'm not good enough and I'm alone, right? And it's kind of its power is in making you feel alone, right? Because you don't want to be found out, so you don't tell anyone you feel that way, and it's kind of like this limiting thing. One of the most freeing things with imposter syndrome is when you start talking to other people about it, because then all of these really amazing people around you who you super respect and you think they've totally got it together are like, yeah, I feel that way. And all of a sudden that barrier comes down, and it's the same thing with nerves. Yeah, there are probably, I've done a lot of interviews on this, and there are probably like 2 people I've spoken to who don't feel this way, and that's cool. Like, you know, they're the unusual ones actually. They kind of sit over here and I don't really know what to do with them. That's cool. But with everyone else, they feel that way. They just express it differently, and they're at different points of dealing with it. What we're going to do tomorrow is actually practice as a group some ways you can stand right in front of people without feeling like, I don't know what to do with my arms, and I don't know what to do with my legs, and like my hair, and like that, those feelings of like, I have these appendages that I don't know what to do with because I'm speaking to you, and do I put them in my pockets or do I put them behind my back? What do I do about moving? All of those things that can signal to other people that you might feel nervous, we're going to figure out how we cut them out and we smooth those edges while still being you. Cool. All right, I'm going to move on, but there'll be time for questions hopefully at the end. So what I'd like you to do is, you have very helpfully, Liz has already put you in your groups. What I'd like you to do is spend, let's say, because we're running a little over time, 3 minutes. And I want you to just have a conversation with each other at looking at these 2 questions. What are you hoping to get out of the next 2 days? And what are you most looking forward to? So you've got some programs, I think, in those packs. You've heard a little bit about what you're going to be doing. just have this conversation in those groups. Take a few minutes. We're now laying the groundwork for the presentation. Cool. I've got a little bit of time to take you through the framework to help you think about your presentations. Now, I know that some people asked, what is the presentation going to be about? It can be about whatever you want, but we've put it into like 3 categories. Kind of what you learned, and or what inspired or interested you, and why that's important to you. If you want, you can write that down. I will come back to it tomorrow. But what you've learned, what interested you or inspired you, and why all of that's important to you. And the idea is I'm going to go through this very quickly now, but I'm actually going to come back to it tomorrow. But what I want to do is give you a bit of a sense of how do you even go about putting together a 10-minute talk when you've got 4 different people who've just met each other about something that they're going to hear just over the next few days, right? The first thing that I'm going to ask you to do tomorrow, after you've listened to all of the different kind of amazing women and you've talked to them and you've kind of gotten your insights, is you're going to come up with a core message, right? That's going to be the one thing as a group you want to convey to the audience tomorrow. Now that might be a scientific concept that you've learned. That might be, or a theory. It might be a personal story that you found really inspiring. It might be a thought you've had as a team that's then reinforced by the various things you've heard of. Don't worry too much about figuring what that is now, but hopefully by giving you this framework, if you hear something over the next 2 days where you think this could be that thing, you can write it down and you can come back to it in the workshop tomorrow, right? So you'll have your core idea. It'll be the singular message you want to convey to your audience. Then you're going to think about how do you explain and reinforce that core message using stories and examples. So it may be the story of a particular person. It may be a piece of research. It may be a historical story, right? Science is full of great stories. And so hopefully you can think about them and write down some key points about the stuff that really captured your imagination, the stuff where you were listening, you know, that you thought this is important to me. And one of the things that I'm going to have you think about tomorrow is why is that important to you? Because chances are that if it got you curious and it got you excited and it was interesting to you and you can explain that to other people in the group and in the room, they will find it exciting, curious, and interesting. And that's what people want. You won't have the answers to this right now, any of those. The core message or the stories or why it's important, because you haven't heard anything yet. But hopefully, if you think about that, think about how are the big ideas you're going to be hearing about brought to life. And think about what makes you, like, your ears perk up, what gets you excited, what makes you think, yeah, I want to hear more about this. Because chances are other people will too, and that's a great thing to include in your presentation tomorrow. What we'll do tomorrow is, so we don't have time for this right now. I'm going to come to this at the very end because I'm going to just whiz through the next bit. But what I hope you can do now that you've met your group is to think about how am I going to gather information? What are the things I'm going to jot down? Are you all going to take notes? Are you going to circle the big ideas? Are you going to have a little like 2-minute, you know, check-in at the end of a session and think about what you found interesting? The more you can coordinate, the more you can collaborate over the next kind of couple of days, like couple of sessions until tomorrow afternoon, the easier it's going to be and the more fun it's going to be to put something together at the end. But one of the things to get you there, like to get you to gain the great information you need to give the presentation, is asking great questions. And I think if there's one thing that makes everyone feel nervous, it's asking questions. I hate asking questions. I hated asking questions in an academic setting because my imposter syndrome was really having me at that time, and I just feel like I couldn't ask a good question. So I've gone and I found some great, interesting articles and research from lots of different places that talks about what are great questions and how do you ask them, right? So this is just some advice. So the first thing is obviously listen. Making sure that you've listened to everything that person is saying and you're not asking them a question about something they've just said, you know, is really important. But make sure you also ask open-ended questions. So not just questions that answers are yes or no, but that allow the person to kind of tell you more. What is it, when you've heard that person speak, what part of that did you feel like, I wish I heard more about this thing? You know, you've told me like X, Y, Z, and I want to hear like XA and XB and XC, right? Like the little bits in between, because I found that so interesting. You can hone in on that. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. So I did say listen, right? So don't just ask them about something they've already said, but that doesn't mean you don't ask for clarification. If someone said something and you didn't understand it, or you wanted more detail, or you weren't really sure, this is the whole point, right, of this workshop. So don't be afraid to ask about that, because again, chances are that if you're not sure, most people are in the room, or at least a few other people won't be sure. Like, this was a great example here when you asked, like, what's this presentation meant to, one person in this group asked, what's the presentation meant to be about? And then I heard like nodding and like yeses over here, because there were multiple people who had the same question. So that's always great. Don't feel the need to give like a long preamble or explanation about why you're asking this question, right? You want to give the speaker as much time as possible to answer it. So you feel free. You don't need to like say, oh, I'm asking this because, you know, I have this background and I'm not sure and this and that. And by the way, I have my question. Like, just go to the question and that's cool. Don't put yourself down, right? There's no need to say, I'm not very smart, so I didn't really understand what you're saying. Or whatever that might be for you. You don't need to do it, so you don't do it. And on the other hand, do make sure you're asking questions and not making comments. I know that some of the older people in the room may really feel me on that one, but there's a lot of places where you go where people say, it's more of a comment really rather than a question. That's cool. If it's a discussion section, then that's what they want. But if it's a question section, you know, that they want questions. So think about them as questions, want to find out more information. And this is a big one, right? Someone said about not being sure how to like get those words out right in the beginning. I'm like that. I don't know how to formulate the question right out of my mouth, you know. So I always write it down so that I kind of can almost read it. Everyone will be different, but feel free to do that. So, with that being said, is there anything you wanted to ask me at this point before I leave you for the rest of the day? I can tell you what I want you to kind of take away from this and going into the next parts of this workshop is I want you to feel a bit more at ease about not maybe having all the answers, but giving it a try anyway, because I think if nothing else, hopefully you've heard that everyone in this room feels nervous and everyone in this room feels like maybe they don't know how to do this, and so it's new for everyone, so you're kind of all in the same boat. And hopefully, like, aside from the kind of feeling side of things, I'm hoping that you have a sense of maybe these are the people in my group and these are the people I'm going to kind of talk to over the next couple of days to get some good, meaty information for our presentation. Would you say that those two things, you feel that? You feel comfortable in knowing how you might move forward? You can say no. They won't be insulted. Okay. I'm going to take silence. I don't like taking silence as a yes, because that is not the way I live my life. I don't really like to hear yes as a yes, but I'm going to say that it's the first workshop and it's early, so I'm going to take silence as a yes and just give you all another few minutes to continue the discussions you had with your group and to think about how you might gather the information for your presentations, and is there anything you've already kind of thought you want to really focus on or find out more about, and what kind of information you might want to gather. And I'm here, so just ask questions if none of that makes sense. Cool, great. So I will leave you in that, and then I think Liz and Essie will take over when time to move on to the next bit. Thank you.